The massive communication array at the heart of the Galactic Council station suddenly erupted with blinking lights and warning chimes. Senior Communications Officer Zethkar rushed to his console, his four arms dancing across holographic displays, as data streams flooded in from the outer rim sensors. Director Vexithara to communications immediately. The station-wide announcement echoed through crystalline corridors where beings of every imaginable form went about their daily routines. Vexithara's serpentine form glided into the communications chamber, her tentacles already twitching with anticipation. In her 800 years of service, she had overseen first contact with dozens of emerging civilizations, but something felt different about this alert. "What have we discovered, Zethkar?" she asked, settling into her biofluid chair that molded perfectly to her alien physiology. "Ma'am, we've intercepted a transmission from Sector 7 Alpha 9. The signal originated from a small planetary system the archives list as Sol, third planet from their star." Zethkar's voice carried a note of confusion that immediately caught Vexthara's attention. She extended a neural tendril toward the data port, instantly absorbing the raw information. Her eyes widened as the primitive electromagnetic waves translated into recognizable patterns. The signal was crude beyond belief, riding on radio frequencies that most civilizations had abandoned millennia ago when they discovered quantum entanglement networks. "This is impossible," Vexithara muttered, her tentacles writhing in agitation. "These readings show no quantum signatures, no dimensional fold technology, no biological transcendence markers. How could such a primitive species even know we exist?" Scanner Operative Quilm materialized through the chamber's phase door, his crystalline body refracting the station's ambient light into dancing rainbows. "Director, I've completed the deep scan of their system. The species calls themselves humans, and their world designation is Earth. The planet shows signs of recent industrial activity, primitive chemical propulsion systems, and basic electromagnetic communications." Vexthara's confusion deepened. "Show me the transmission content." The chamber's central hologram flickered to life, displaying the decoded message. The words appeared in standard galactic script, but their origin was unmistakably alien. "To the governing body of star-traveling civilizations, we are the people of Earth. We have been listening to the whispers between worlds and know of your Great Council. We seek peaceful contact and knowledge. We have much to learn, but perhaps something to offer in return." Listening to whispers between worlds, Quilm's crystalline form pulsed with curiosity. How could they intercept our secured quantum channels with such primitive technology? Vexithara was already reaching for her priority communication device. "Emergency session. All department heads to the strategy chamber immediately." Within the hour, the station's most senior officials had assembled in the strategy chamber, a vast spherical room where gravity could be adjusted for different species' comfort zones. The Netheri delegation floated in gaseous form near the ceiling, while the rock-based Golomites anchored themselves to the floor. Energy beings flickered in and out of visible spectrum, and the insectoid Zari buzzed anxiously in their geometric formations. "The situation is unprecedented," Vexthara began, her voice carrying to every corner of the sphere. "A pre-spaceflight civilization has somehow detected our existence and initiated contact." Defense Coordinator Thakmur, a towering 8-foot warrior from the militant Kruon Empire, slammed his energy staff against the floor. "Impossible. Our quantum networks are unbreachable by primitive technology. This must be some form of deception or invasion tactic." "My thoughts exactly," agreed Intelligence Chief Ivordan, whose multiple heads nodded in unison. "Perhaps an enemy faction is using this primitive world as a staging ground." But Dr. Zilandra, the station's chief xenobiologist, raised a delicate concern. "What if they're telling the truth? What if they've somehow developed abilities we don't understand? Remember, the Voidwalkers initially appeared primitive until we learned they existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously." The debate raged. For hours, some officials argued for immediate military reconnaissance, fearing a trap. Others suggested ignoring the transmission entirely, dismissing it as background noise from another doomed pre-spaceflight civilization. But curiosity is a powerful force among intelligent beings, regardless of their physical form. Finally, cultural liaison Merthala, whose species had successfully integrated more worlds into the Council than any other, spoke up. In 3,000 years of Council history, no species has ever initiated first contact while still bound to their home system. The statistical improbability alone makes this worthy of investigation. Vexathara felt the tide of opinion shifting. Very well. We extend a formal invitation, but under extreme precautionary protocols. If this is genuine, we satisfy our curiosity. If it's a deception, we expose it quickly. The invitation was crafted carefully, embedded with quantum markers that would test the humans' true technological capabilities. If they could respond through proper channels, they might indeed possess hidden advanced technology. If they replied through primitive radio waves, they would reveal their actual development level. 3 weeks passed with agonizing slowness. The Council's daily operations continued, but an undercurrent of anticipation ran through every department. Betting pools emerged among various species about whether the humans would respond at all, and if so, how. Then it happened. The communications array lit up again, but this time with a response that sent shockwaves through the entire station. The message came through their primitive radio waves, exactly as expected, but its content was anything but primitive. Ambassador Hyunwoo Kim and the Earth delegation gratefully accept your invitation. We come in peace, carrying hopes for friendship and the dreams of our world. We understand we have much to learn, but we bring something unique, the perspective of a young species still discovering its place among the stars. What truly stunned the Council wasn't the acceptance itself, but what followed. Attached to the message were detailed astronomical calculations showing they had not only located the Council station, but had already begun construction of a vessel, capable of reaching it. Using purely chemical propulsion and basic life support systems, they had designed a ship that could somehow survive the journey across hundreds of light years. "Director," Quilm's voice carried a note of awe, "they're actually coming, and according to these schematics, they'll arrive in approximately 47 standard days." Vexathara stared at the data streams flowing across her displays. In all, her centuries of service, she had never encountered anything quite like this, a species so primitive they still used combustion engines, yet somehow possessing the audacity and ingenuity to attempt interstellar travel to meet civilizations thousands of years more advanced. "Prepare the guest quarters," she finally commanded, "and alert all department heads. We're about to meet the humans." The warning klaxons echoed through the Galactic Council station as proximity sensors detected an incoming vessel. Traffic controller Vectai rushed to his monitoring station, expecting to see another sleek Council ship materializing from the quantum fold networks. Instead, his compound eyes widened in disbelief at what appeared on his screens. "By the void. Storms of Nexus Prime," he muttered. "What in the galaxy is that thing?" The human ship lurched out of what the sensors barely registered as hyperspace, tumbling like a wounded asteroid, before its primitive stabilizers finally kicked in. The vessel looked like someone had taken spare parts from a dozen different machines and welded them together with pure determination. Thick metal plates covered its hull in an uneven patchwork, while bright orange flames sputtered from its fusion drives like an ancient campfire. Ambassador Hyunwoo Kim gripped his command chair as the ship shuddered to a halt near the station's docking bay. Through the reinforced windows, he could see the massive structure that housed the Galactic Council, a construction so vast it could have held Earth's moon inside its central chamber. "Well, we made it," Captain Yoonji Lee said with a grin, wiping sweat from her forehead as she shut down the overworked engines. "I wasn't sure those drives would hold together for the final jump." Dr. Min-Ho Park looked up from his scanner readings, his face pale but excited. "The biological diversity readings are off the charts. I'm detecting life forms that exist in states of matter I didn't even know were possible." Communications Specialist. So young Choi adjusted her translation equipment one final time. "The universal translator is working, but I'm picking up communication methods that go beyond sound or electromagnetic signals. Some of these beings are talking through quantum, field manipulation and dimensional ripples." Outside their crude vessel, the docking bay filled with curious council personnel. Maintenance robots shaped like floating metal spheres buzzed around the human ship, their sensors trying to make sense of the primitive construction. A group of Zephyrian engineers, beings that looked like walking crystal formations, gathered nearby and chatted in harmonic frequencies about the fascinating primitive welding techniques. The docking tube extended toward the human ship with mechanical precision, but even this simple process became complicated. The Council's advanced docking system was designed for ships with standardized ports, not the hand-built airlock that Kim's team had cobbled together from salvaged space station parts. Manual seal required, announced the docking computer in 17 different languages simultaneously. Captain Lee suited up and manually aligned their airlock with the station's system, a process that drew even more curious onlookers. A crowd of aliens pressed against the observation windows, watching with the same fascination that humans might observe ants building a hill. Finally, with a satisfying clang, the connection locked into place. Kim straightened his simple blue uniform and looked at his team. They wore standard Earth diplomatic attire, clean and professional but obviously primitive compared to what awaited them on the other side of that airlock. "Remember," Kim said quietly, "we're representing all of humanity today. Stay calm, be respectful, and don't let them intimidate us." The airlock cycled open, revealing a corridor that seemed to stretch into infinity. The walls pulsed with living light, and the floor felt alive beneath their feet. Floating guide drones approached them, scanning them with beams of soft blue energy, before projecting holographic arrows showing the path to the Great Assembly. As they walked through the station, the humans couldn't help but stare. Creatures that defied imagination moved through the corridors around them. A being made entirely of swirling gas phases through the walls like a living storm cloud. Robotic entities with thousands of tiny legs scuttled along the ceiling, their optical sensors tracking the humans' movement. A group of tall, elegant aliens with skin that looked like polished metal glided past, their feet never quite touching the ground. Dr. Park whispered excitedly, "Those are definitely silicon-based life forms, and those floating ones might be pure energy beings contained in magnetic fields." The Great Assembly Hall was beyond anything Earth's imagination could have prepared them for. The chamber was so massive that its far walls disappeared into a misty distance. Thousands of seats, platforms, floating pods, and energy containment fields housed representatives from every corner of the galaxy. In the center, beings of pure light flickered and danced in complex patterns while communicating through color changes. Nearby, a delegation of what looked like living plants swayed gently, their leaves rustling in languages of scent and chemical signals. High above, creatures that existed partially in other dimensions phased in and out of visible reality, their form shifting like living shadows. The hive mind collective from the Andorian spiral created a constant background hum as thousands of individual minds spoke as one voice. Their insectoid forms moved in perfect synchronization, creating mesmerizing patterns across their designated section of the assembly. Kim and his team were escorted to a section clearly marked for primitive civilizations under observation. The seats were basic metal chairs, uncomfortable and obviously designed for beings who hadn't yet mastered anti-gravity or biomorphic furniture. High Chancellor Zix Mora, a towering figure with 6 arms and skin that shifted between colors like an oil slick, gestured dismissively toward their assigned seating area. Her voice boomed across the chamber through advanced sound manipulation technology. Representatives from the Sol system will observe from the standard pre-spaceflight section. This preliminary evaluation should proceed quickly. Laughter rippled through various sections of the assembly. The Vorthak delegation, beings that resembled armored bears with tentacle faces, made sounds that their translators rendered as amused. Chuckling. Even some of the more dignified species allowed themselves small expressions of condescension, but Kim and his team showed no signs of embarrassment or offense. They settled into their assigned seats with quiet dignity, Dr. Park immediately pulling out a tablet to take notes on the incredible diversity around them. Captain Lee sat with military precision, her eyes constantly scanning for potential threats or escape routes. So young Choi activated her recording equipment, determined to capture every moment of this historic encounter. "Look at them," whispered a crystalline being from the Nexus Confederation to its neighbor. "They act as if they belong here." "Primitive species often lack the intelligence to recognize their own inadequacy," replied a floating brain in a containment suit from the Cerebral Collective. But something in the human's calm confidence began to intrigue the more observant council members. These beings had traveled hundreds of light years in a ship held together with metal welding and determination. They sat in the most advanced gathering in galactic history without showing fear or overwhelming awe. Ambassador Kim looked around the vast assembly with genuine curiosity rather than intimidation. When his eyes met those of various alien representatives, he nodded politely, treating each being with the same respect he would show to a human diplomat. "Interesting," murmured Elder Tothran of the Ancient Collective, a being so old his species had transcended physical form eons ago. "They show no signs of the usual primitive fear responses. Either they're exceptionally brave or exceptionally foolish." As the formal session prepared to begin, a subtle shift occurred in the assembly's atmosphere. What had started as casual amusement began to transform into cautious curiosity. These humans had already accomplished something remarkable just by reaching the station. Now the real question remained, what else might they be capable of? The Great Assembly fell silent as High Chancellor Zixmora called the session to order, her 6 arms spreading wide in the traditional gesture of galactic unity. Behind her, the holographic display showed the official seal of the Council, while before her sat 4 humans who had somehow crossed the vastness of space to be here. The galaxy was about to discover that sometimes the most extraordinary things come in the most ordinary packages. The ceremonial chime echoed through the Great Assembly as High Chancellor Zixmora's 6 arms gestured toward the human delegation. Her voice boomed across the vast chamber with obvious impatience. "The floor recognizes the Sol System representatives for preliminary species evaluation. You have exactly 10 standard minutes to justify your presence here." Ambassador Kim rose from his uncomfortable metal chair, his blue uniform looking almost comically simple compared to the advanced biosuits and energy fields surrounding him. The chamber erupted in a wave of dismissive, chittering, buzzing, and harmonic frequencies that the translation matrix rendered as various forms of mockery. A massive reptilian delegate from the Saurian hegemony hissed loudly, "10 minutes is generous for primitives who still burn chemicals to move through space." Kim walked steadily toward the central platform, his footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet that fell over the assembly. Behind him, Dr. Minho Park clutched his data tablet nervously, while Captain Yunji Lee and communications specialist So Young Choi watched from their seats with intense focus. The platform was designed for beings of all sizes and energy states. As Kim stepped onto it, the surface automatically adjusted to his height and biology, scanning him with gentle blue light. Holographic projectors activated around him, ready to display whatever information he might wish to share. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," Kim began, his voice carrying clearly through the translation matrix to every corner of the massive chamber. The system automatically converted his words into thousands of different languages, energy patterns, chemical signals, and even quantum fluctuations for species that communicated through dimensional manipulation. Several delegates exchanged what their species considered amused glances. The floating gas beings swirled faster in patterns that indicated entertainment, while the crystalline entities chimed in frequencies that suggested they found the situation amusing. "We come from a young world new to the stars," Kim continued, seemingly unaffected by the obvious condescension radiating from the assembly. "We have much to learn from civilizations that have traveled between worlds for thousands of years." This admission triggered an immediate response. The Vorthak representative, a massive bear-like creature covered in armored plates, threw back its tentacled head and roared with laughter. The sound was so loud that several nearby delegates had to adjust their hearing protection systems. "At least they know their place," rumbled the Vorthak through its translator. "Perhaps this won't be a complete waste of time." But instead of appearing intimidated, Kim's expression remained calm and confident. "You're absolutely right, we are new to space travel. Our ships are crude, our technology primitive by your standards. But in our brief history as a species, we have learned some things that might interest you. The laughter began to fade as curious murmurs replaced it. Even the most dismissive delegates found themselves listening more carefully. In our short time as a civilization, we have learned to cure diseases that have plagued other worlds for thousands of years, Kim said, gesturing to Dr. Park, who immediately stood and activated his holographic display. The air above the platform shimmered as three-dimensional medical diagrams appeared. Dr. Park's nervous voice carried across the chamber as he began explaining, "Our research shows treatments for 17 conditions that Council medical databases list as incurable: quantum cellular decay, dimensional phase sickness, bioenergy cascade failure." A shocked silence fell over the medical representatives in the assembly. The chief physician of the Healing Collective, a being whose species had dedicated themselves to medicine for millennia, leaned forward in disbelief. "Impossible," the healer whispered, but its scanning equipment was already confirming the data. "These solutions are elegant, using biological processes we never considered." Kim nodded respectfully toward the medical section before continuing. "We have also developed ways to restore dead planets without destroying existing ecosystems. Our terraforming techniques work with natural life rather than replacing it entirely." More holographic displays materialized, showing before and after images of restored worlds. The Environmental Council representatives, beings who had spent centuries trying to repair damage caused by traditional terraforming methods, studied the images with growing excitement. "They're actually healing the planets instead of reshaping them," gasped an environmental specialist whose tree-like form began glowing with bioluminescent patterns of amazement. The chamber's atmosphere was shifting noticeably. What had started as condescending amusement was transforming into genuine curiosity. Even the most arrogant delegates were beginning to pay serious attention to the primitive humans on the platform. But Kim wasn't finished. He paused, letting the medical and environmental revelations sink in before delivering what he clearly considered his most important point. "However, perhaps most relevant to this assembly," Kim said with a slight smile that somehow conveyed both humility and confidence, "we have something we call diplomacy, the art of finding common ground between entirely different peoples while respecting what makes each unique." The translation matrix struggled with the concept for a moment. In most galactic languages, the closest equivalent words involved conquest, genetic modification, or mental linking. The idea of voluntary cooperation between fundamentally different species without changing their essential nature was almost incomprehensible to many. Council members. High Chancellor Zixmora's color-shifting skin flickered through several confused patterns. "Clarify this term, diplomacy. Do you mean technological integration, genetic compatibility protocols, neural network linking?" "None of those," Kim replied, his smile growing warmer. "We mean the ability to understand different viewpoints, find solutions that work for everyone involved, and maintain peaceful relationships without forcing anyone to become something they're not." A hive mind representative buzzed in confusion. "But how do you achieve unity without shared consciousness? How do you prevent conflict without behavioral modification?" Captain Lee stood up from her seat, her military bearing evident as she addressed the chamber. "On Earth, we have over 200 nations, thousands of different cultures and billions of individuals with unique perspectives. Yet we've learned to work together, trade with each other, and resolve conflicts through negotiation rather than force." The chamber erupted in excited chatter as the implications became clear. The Council had been dealing with interspecies conflicts for millennia, usually resolving them through complex technological solutions, genetic modifications, or simply separating incompatible species across vast distances. Communications specialist So Young Choi activated her equipment, and the chamber filled with recordings from Earth, peace negotiations, trade agreements, international cooperation projects. The alien delegates watched in fascination as humans with completely different appearances, languages, and beliefs worked together voluntarily. "This is unprecedented," whispered Elder Tothran of the Ancient Collective. "Voluntary cooperation, without consciousness merging or genetic compatibility." Dr. Park stepped forward again, this time displaying Earth's history of conflict resolution. We've had wars, certainly, but we've also developed ways to prevent them, to end them peacefully, and to help former enemies become allies. The massive Drakmor military commander, a warrior whose species had conquered dozens of worlds, leaned forward intently. You mean, you convert enemies without defeating them in battle? Without proving superiority through strength? We convince them, Kim explained simply. We find out what they really need, what they're afraid of, and we help them see that cooperation serves their interests better than conflict. The chamber fell into an unusual silence as thousands of advanced beings contemplated this simple but revolutionary concept. For species that had achieved peace through technological control, genetic modification, or simple separation, the idea of voluntary cooperation between fundamentally different groups was almost magical. High Chancellor. Ziximora's 6 arms trembled slightly as she processed what she was hearing. You're claiming that your primitive species has solved the fundamental problem of intergroup conflict without advanced technology. Not solved, Kim corrected gently. We're still learning, but yes, we've found ways to make it work. And we believe these methods might be useful in galactic relations as well. The 10-minute time limit had long since expired, but no one in the chamber seemed to notice. The primitive humans from the Outer Rim had just suggested they possessed something that the galaxy's most advanced civilizations had never achieved: true diplomatic unity without forced conformity. The Great Assembly buzzed with excitement, confusion, and growing respect as the Council began to realize they might have underestimated these remarkable humans. The tension in the Great Assembly crackled like electricity as Commander Thekval of the Drakmor Empire rose from his war throne. His massive form towered 12 feet high, covered in battle-scarred adamantium armor that had seen 1,000 conflicts across the galaxy. Energy weapons mounted on his shoulders glowed with contained power, and his cybernetic eyes burned red. With barely controlled aggression, "Enough of this pathetic display!" Thekval's voice boomed through the chamber like thunder, causing several smaller species to retreat into their protective shells. His armored fist crashed down on his delegation's platform with such force that the reinforced metal actually cracked. "These primitive mammals speak of miracles with no proof. Show us this so-called diplomacy, or be expelled for wasting the Council's precious time." The chamber erupted in excited chatter. Various species began placing bets on how quickly the humans would back down from the infamous Drakmor commander. The Vorthak delegation roared their approval, while the crystalline beings chimed in harmonic agreement. Even the peaceful energy collective flickered with anticipation. Ambassador Kim stood calmly in the center of the platform, completely unfazed by the towering warrior's display of intimidation. His simple blue uniform looked almost comical next to Thekval's weapon-bristling armor, but his expression remained steady and respectful. "We accept your challenge, Commander Thekval," Kim said with a slight bow that somehow managed to convey both respect and confidence. "Perhaps we could help resolve the Kepler sector dispute." The effect was instantaneous and dramatic. The entire assembly fell into stunned silence so complete that the ambient hum of the station's life support systems became audible. Thousands of alien eyes, optical sensors and energy patterns focused on the human, with expressions ranging from disbelief to horror. The Kepler sector dispute was legendary among council members. For over 3 centuries, it had been the most intractable conflict in galactic politics, a territorial nightmare that had defied every attempt at resolution. The energy-based luminari and the silicon-based crystallines had been locked in an endless stalemate over the resource-rich system, with neither side willing to compromise on what they considered essential survival needs. High Chancellor Ziximora's 6 arms trembled as her color-shifting skin cycled through patterns of shock and disbelief. "Human, do you understand what you're suggesting? 47 different mediators have attempted to resolve this conflict. Master diplomats, ancient minds, even AI collectives with processing power beyond imagination. All have failed." Dr. Park leaned forward from his seat, his face pale with concern. "Ambassador, perhaps we should start with something smaller," he whispered urgently. But Captain Lee caught Kim's eye and gave him a subtle nod of support. She had seen him work miracles before during Earth's own conflict resolutions, turning impossible situations into breakthroughs through sheer patience and insight. Communications specialist So Young Choi activated her recording equipment, determined to capture whatever was about to unfold. Her hands shook slightly as she adjusted the settings, knowing they were about to witness either humanity's greatest triumph or most spectacular failure. The luminary delegation flickered with agitated energy patterns near the chamber's upper atmosphere. They were beings of pure electromagnetic force, contained within complex magnetic field generators that allowed them to interact with solid matter. Their representative, a swirling mass of golden light called Flux Prime, pulsed with centuries of accumulated frustration. On the opposite side of the chamber, the crystalline delegation sat in perfect geometric formation. These silicon-based entities looked like living gemstones, their faceted bodies refracting light into complex patterns. Their speaker, a towering crystal formation known as Resonance Alpha, vibrated with low-frequency harmonics that translated, "Has deep skepticism. The primitive seeks to accomplish in hours what we have debated for centuries." Resonance Alpha's voice rang like struck crystal through the translation matrix. "This is either supreme confidence or supreme foolishness." Kim nodded respectfully toward both delegations. "We request 4 hours with both parties, 2 hours with each group separately. Then we'll reconvene to discuss possible solutions." Commander Tekval's cybernetic implants whirred as he processed this request. 4 hours. Master Negotiator Vexthul of the Diplomatic Corps spent 4 years on this conflict and achieved nothing. High Chancellor Zix Mora's multiple eyes blinked in rapid succession as she considered the implications. The Council's reputation was at stake, but curiosity was winning over caution. "Very well, humans, but understand the consequences. Failure will result in immediate expulsion from Council space. Success—" She paused, her skin shifting to patterns of uncertainty. "Success would change everything we thought we knew about conflict resolution." The chamber buzzed with excited energy as 3 separate conference rooms were prepared. Advanced alien technology created perfect soundproof barriers while maintaining visual contact with the main assembly. The gathered delegates pressed against viewing screens, watching like spectators at the galaxy's most important sporting event. Kim entered the first conference room with Flux Prime and the Luminari delegation. The energy beings swirled restlessly, their electromagnetic fields creating beautiful but chaotic light patterns that reflected their emotional state. "For 300 years, we have explained our position." Flux Prime pulsed with frustrated golden energy. The Kepler sector contains 12 stellar cores with the specific energy frequencies essential for our reproduction. Without access to these stars, our species faces extinction within 2 generations. Kim sat quietly, his primitive tablet recording everything while he asked simple questions that somehow no one had thought to ask before. What specific energy frequencies do you need? Are there alternative sources? What would your ideal outcome look like if the crystallines didn't exist? For 2 hours he listened as the Luminari explained not just their political position, but their fears, their hopes, their desperation for survival. Kim asked about their biology, their culture, their dreams for the future. Gradually, the agitated energy patterns of the delegation began to stabilize into calmer, more organized flows. Meanwhile, the assembly watched in fascination as the conference room monitors showed Kim simply talking and listening. No advanced technology, no neural linking, no genetic modification devices, just conversation. When the 2 hours ended, Kim moved to the second conference room with Resonance Alpha and the crystalline delegation. These silicon-based beings sat in perfect mathematical arrangements, their crystalline bodies creating complex harmonic frequencies as they communicated. The mineral composition of the Kepler sector's planets and asteroid belts represents the only known source of the rare elements required for our growth matrices, Resonance Alpha chimed with crystalline precision. Without these resources, our civilization will begin structural degradation within 50 cycles. Again, Kim listened with the same patient attention. He asked about their needs, their fears, their vision of success. The crystallines, beings of logic and order, found themselves explaining not just their resource requirements, but their cultural values, their scientific achievements, their concerns about the future. The assembly watched in growing amazement, as the rigid geometric patterns of the crystalline delegation gradually became more fluid, more responsive to Kim's questions. When the 4 hours concluded, both delegations returned to the main chamber, with expressions that their species had never displayed before. Cautious hope mixed with curiosity about what the other side might have revealed. Kim stood once again on the central platform, now facing not just the two conflicted species, but the entire assembled galaxy. The chamber fell silent as thousands of beings waited to see if the impossible was about to become possible. After speaking with both delegations, Kim began with calm confidence, "I believe we can resolve this conflict very simply. The Luminari need the stellar cores for their energy-based reproduction cycles. The crystallines need the planets and asteroids for their mineral-based growth matrices." He paused, letting this sink in before delivering the revelation that would stun the galaxy. Neither species has any interest in what the other considers essential. The Luminari can't use solid minerals, and the crystallines can't absorb stellar energy. You've been fighting over resources that don't actually compete with each other. The silence that followed was so profound that it seemed to bend space itself. Flux Prime and Resonance Alpha stared at each other across the chamber, their energy patterns and harmonic frequencies expressing the same emotion, amazement that the solution had been so simple. Within minutes, both species were eagerly agreeing to share the Kepler sector, with the Luminari claiming the stars and the crystallines taking the solid matter. A conflict that had deadlocked the galaxy's greatest minds for 3 centuries had been resolved by a human who simply listened to what each side actually needed. The Great Assembly erupted in chaos as the implications crashed over them like a tsunami of possibility. The moment Kim finished speaking, the Great Assembly exploded into absolute pandemonium. Delegates who had witnessed the birth and death of entire star systems, beings who had mastered technologies that could bend the fabric of reality itself, sat frozen in their seats as the impossible became reality before their eyes. The Luminari delegations swirled in excited golden spirals, their energy patterns creating a light show that painted the chamber walls in dancing rainbows. Flux Prime pulsed with frequencies that translated as pure amazement. 3 centuries of conflict resolved in 4 hours. How is this possible? Resonance Alpha's crystalline form vibrated with harmonic patterns of disbelief and wonder. Our computational matrices ran probability calculations for millennia. No scenario predicted this outcome. High Chancellor Zix Mora's 6 arms trembled as her color-shifting skin cycled rapidly through every emotion pattern in her species' repertoire. Her multiple eyes blinked in rapid succession as she tried to process what had just occurred. "Impossible," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the growing chaos. No species has ever achieved such results. The Council's greatest minds, our most advanced AI systems, our transcendent consciousnesses, have all failed where you resolved a dispute without genetic modification, neural linking, or technological subjugation. Kim finished gently, his calm voice somehow carrying across the chaotic chamber. "We know. We studied your historical records during our journey here." The chamber fell silent again as thousands of alien minds focused on this simple statement. Communications specialist. So young Choi chose that moment to activate her tablet, her fingers flying across the holographic interface as data streams filled the air above her. "We've analyzed your databases extensively," she announced, her voice growing stronger as she addressed the assembly. "We've identified 47 other deadlocked conflicts throughout Council space, border disputes, resource conflicts, territorial disagreements that have remained unsolved for decades or centuries." Dr. Minho Park stood beside her, his xenobiology expertise adding weight to their claims. "Based on our preliminary analysis, we believe most of these conflicts could be resolved through similar diplomatic approaches. The fundamental problem isn't complexity, It's that no one has simply asked the right questions. The implications hit the assembly like a quantum shockwave, rippling through space-time itself. Species that had spent millennia developing faster-than-light travel, dimensional manipulation, and consciousness transcendence suddenly realized they had overlooked the most basic aspect of interspecies relations, actually understanding each other. The ancient collective, beings so old they had existed before most stars were born, began pulsing with energy patterns that hadn't been seen for eons. Elder Tothran's ethereal form flickered with what could only be described as embarrassment mixed with profound respect. "We have been fools," the Ancient One transmitted directly into every mind in the chamber. "We achieved transcendence of physical form, mastery over matter itself, yet we never learned to simply listen." Commander Thekval, the massive Drakmor, warrior who had challenged the humans just hours before, slowly rose from his war throne. His weapon systems powered down with audible mechanical whirs, and his cybernetic implants dimmed to their lowest settings, a sign of respect reserved for only the most honored opponents. "The Drakmor Empire formally requests human mediation in our border dispute with the hegemony," he announced, his voice carrying none of its earlier aggression. "A conflict that has cost millions of lives over 2 centuries. The chamber erupted. Again, as the significance of this request sank in, the Drakmor Empire had never asked for outside help in their entire warrior history. They conquered or were conquered. There was no middle ground in their culture until this moment. But Thekval wasn't finished. Furthermore, the Empire offers a permanent military alliance with Earth. Any species that can end wars without firing a shot deserves our protection and respect. Within minutes, the requests began pouring in like a flood. The Hive Mind Collective buzzed in perfect harmony. "We require assistance with our ideological split from the breakaway clusters." The Crystalline Confederacy chimed their request for help with mining rights disputes. Even the mysterious Void Walkers, beings that existed partially in other dimensions, materialized long enough to request mediation in their reality phase conflicts. Captain Hyunji Lee found herself frantically taking notes as 17 different species formally requested human diplomatic intervention. Her military training had prepared her for battle, but nothing had prepared her for this overwhelming wave of galactic politics suddenly focused on her small team. High Chancellor Zix Mora descended from her elevated platform, something that hadn't happened in over 1,000 years. When the Supreme Leader of the Galactic Council approached anyone personally, it meant history was being made. Her 6 arms spread wide in the most formal gesture of respect her species could offer. "Ambassador." "Kim," she said, her voice carrying the weight of ages, "we have been fools. You didn't come here seeking membership in our council. You came offering something we never knew we lacked." Kim's expression remained humble, despite the magnitude of what was happening around him. "We came hoping to learn from civilizations, thousands of years older than ours. We never expected to teach anything. But you have taught us the most important lesson of all," Zix Mora replied, her skin shifting to patterns of deep respect and wonder. "That wisdom isn't about transcending our nature. It's about understanding it and using it to connect with others." The months that followed transformed the galaxy in ways no technology ever could. The Great Assembly was relocated to a massive new station constructed in Earth's orbit, built through the combined efforts of hundreds of species working together for the first time in galactic history. The construction itself became a testament to human diplomatic principles, as species that had never cooperated before found themselves sharing knowledge and resources. The station was a marvel of combined technologies. Crystalline beings grew. The structural supports while energy-based species powered the systems. The Drakmor Empire provided defense platforms, but for the first time in their history, they were designed to protect rather than conquer. Dimensional beings created spaces that existed in multiple realities simultaneously, allowing species with different physical requirements to meet comfortably. Ambassador Kim stood on the observation deck of the New Earth diplomatic station, watching, a sight that would have been impossible just months before. Ships from every corner of the galaxy approached through organized traffic patterns, their diverse designs creating a constantly changing light show against the stars. Massive, crystalline, vessels that looked like flying cathedrals moved alongside sleek energy ships that appeared to be made of captured starlight. Drakmor war cruisers, their weapons replaced with diplomatic communication arrays, escorted peaceful trading vessels from species that had been their enemies just weeks before. Dr. Park joined him at the observation windows, his xenobiology equipment scanning the incredible diversity of life forms arriving for the daily peace negotiations. The biological diversity here exceeds anything I ever imagined possible. Species that evolved in completely different conditions, some that shouldn't even be able to exist in the same space-time, all working together. "Do you think they truly understand what happened?" Park asked, watching a group of gas-based beings phase through the solid hull of a visiting ship while maintaining perfect communication with the silicon-based crew inside. Kim nodded thoughtfully, his eyes reflecting the dancing lights of the approaching vessels. "They're beginning to understand. For the first time in galactic history, different species are solving problems together, instead of simply avoiding them, conquering each other, or modifying themselves to be compatible." Captain Lee approached with her daily briefing tablet, her military bearing now adapted to the strange new reality of being a peacekeeper rather than a warrior. 17 successful mediations completed this week alone. The Council has officially designated our methods as the human paradigm. They're implementing diplomatic training programs based on our techniques across all member species. So Young Choi looked up from her communication console, which now handled thousands of incoming messages from across the galaxy. "Ambassador, we have requests from 73 different species asking to establish cultural exchange programs with Earth. They want to learn not just our diplomatic methods, but our arts, our literature, our ways of thinking about problems." Kim chuckled softly as he watched a massive cargo ship disgorge a group of peaceful traders from 6 different species, all working together to organize their goods for a joint exhibition. "It seems our greatest export isn't our technology or our resources. It's something much simpler and much more powerful, the idea that our differences make us stronger, not weaker." As the day shift changed and new vessels continued arriving from distant star systems, each bringing their own conflicts and hopes for resolution, Ambassador Kim realized that humanity had indeed found its place among the stars. Not as conquerors seeking to dominate the galaxy, not as subjects bowing to superior civilizations, but as teachers of something the galaxy had somehow forgotten in its rush toward technological transcendence. They had learned that the highest form of intelligence wasn't about becoming something else through genetic modification or consciousness uploading or dimensional transcendence. It was about remaining true to your essential nature while developing the wisdom and compassion to understand others who were completely different from yourself. The galaxy would never be the same. For the first time in millions of years of galactic civilization, peace was spreading not through conquest or submission, but through understanding. And at the center of it all were 4 humans in simple blue uniforms, proving that sometimes the most advanced technology in the universe is simply knowing how to listen. The end.